which means he's going to join us earlier as he does right now. J-Mac, you ready to rock?
I am ready to rock. Little Wi-Fi mistake again. I got to remember to turn that off when I'm outside. It's a grind. It's about getting 1% better every day, as Nick Sirianni.
Yeah, I was going to say, you sound too much like Nick Sirianni.
Yeah.
But we'll
starting
forgive
to rub
you
off
that.
on me. He's like Ted Lasso.
Yeah, I got it. Do you watch that show, Kerr?
Oh, my God. I love Ted Lasso. I can quote him all day.
Oh, shoot. I got to start watching that because he mentioned that I had Yogi Roth on my CBS show yesterday. He made a Ted Lasso reference, so I guess I got to start watching. All right, forget Ted Lasso. Let's talk about Nick Sirianni. Week 1, J-Mac, hanging with him both after practice for your media sessions and watching him work the field. Has he lived up to what you thought he would be first week running a training camp for the Birds?
Yeah, I mean, he's as advertised. Obviously, he's very energetic. It's not an act. That's his personality. That's who he is, sort of 24/7 with cameras on, cameras off. Everything's quick. Everything's fast-paced. A little bit reminiscent of Chip Kelly in that manner, how practices are run. Very short. I mean, our buddy Adam Kaplan, friend of the show, he said it's the shortest practice. He was there the other day, shortest training camp practice he's ever seen. 75 minutes, basically on Wednesday and Friday. So it's interesting. I will say that it's he's very hands-on. Obviously, he's got a background coaching wide receivers. He was a wide receiver in college. He's been very hands-on with that position group, which is understandable because, look, they've been a disaster the last 2 years in the Doug Peterson regime. So they need to get better there. So he seems to be spending a lot of time. Now, my one concern about that is you're the head coach of the football team. You got to worry about other things. It can't be just about getting the receivers up to speed. So, it's 4 days, and I think he's certainly not overwhelmed by everything. Anyone who thought that was going to happen, I don't think that was fair at the time. I certainly think he's proving it's not fair.
John, one thing, when Nick Sirianni got hired, I was talking to a couple of people around the league. They said he's very hands-on, and you pointed that out, specifically with quarterbacks and wide receivers. How has he been evaluating Jalen Hurts over these last couple of days?
Yeah, the most interesting thing with Jalen, because we focused on the mechanics a lot, and Nick has said a couple times, he doesn't worry about the top half of his body. He doesn't worry about the throwing motion. Certain guys are going to have certain proclivities from that. If you want to compare it to a shooting style in the NBA, he's mainly focused on the bottom half and the footwork. So from the fundamentals, it was interesting. That's a lot of information. Typically, you don't get that from head coaches in this league. So he's more worried about the footwork than anything else. And yeah, we all knew that would be a work in progress. And I think you've seen that. I did my stock market for the first 4 practices. I'm going to do that on the off days. So you have the Bulls, the Bears, and the stagnant stocks, I like to call them. And, Jalen looks like the same guy was last year. An intriguing playmaker, and you wonder if he can be NFL accurate. And I don't think we have that answer, but we're only, 4 practices in.
Now, I hear what you're saying about the coach giving you a breadth of information, which is different than you probably get from most coaches about his mechanics and this, that, and the other thing. Here's what I judge: results. And I know it's just practice, but I know that you're keeping track and everybody's keeping track. How many balls are being caught? How many balls are being dropped? How many balls aren't even close? How many balls are being picked off? Don't tell me about how he looks and his mechanics. Yeah, that's up to you guys. We're simpletons. We're fans. We want to know what were the results. How have the results been for Jalen Hurts?
Well, I think, the first day was really bad from a percentage standpoint. And ever since then, it's been pretty good. All of this is contextual. I said, that day one when I was talking to you guys, I mean, it was all red zone work. So it was kind of unfair because It's all tight windows. It's all really difficult spaces to fit the football in. So it's going to be a little bit more difficult. Now, as you go on, and some people like to count up, how many throws he has and how many completions he has. And I saw one at 70 something percent, which is, in theory, that sounds really good, especially when you're 52. But understand, if you're going to count 7-on-7 drills, you're supposed to complete those passes. You're supposed. The joke with Sam Bradford constantly, he was so accurate, the ball never hit the ground in 7-on-7s. I mean, that drill is designed for the offense. So all of this is added into it. I will just say there are times where he throws strikes, and usually that happens when he locks on receivers. He's very accurate, very strong arm. The problem is he can't lock on receivers in this league. When he tends to move his head and he goes from side to side on the field, that's when you see the inaccuracy kind of pop up.
John, one player I've been taking notice of that's been doing really well the first week is Steve Nelson, as he likes to be called. How has he been the first week?
Yeah, he's been great. I mean, you think about Monday, he was one of my guys, stock rising guys. I mean, he shows up on Monday. He's taken the first team reps on Wednesday, and he's been there pretty much the entire time. Craig James kind of rotates in occasionally, gets the first team rep here and there. He's been really physical. And the impressive part about that to me, they haven't put the pads on yet. And he's like beating people up out there. So I've said it, he's sort of like a domino effect in the fact that it enables you to put Avonte Maddox in his natural position, or at least what the Eagles perceived his natural position to be, slot corner. He obviously played outside in college at Pitt. But the point I'm trying to make about Avonte is we're 4 years in with Avonte Maddox. This is his fourth year. This is his contract year. He's never had a year where he just was able to sit in the slot and play there. He's had to play free safety. He's had to play outside corner. So I think if everybody stays healthy, that's going to help the defense. And I think it helps the young receivers because Slay and Nelson are just killing them. And it looks bad on the practice field, but, you're going to get better because you got two guys who are making things really, really difficult for them. And that's sort of where you get better. It's interesting. Nick Sirianni, we talk about competition. He grades every practice and he awards a winner, offense, defense. Defense is 4-0 unless you're great.
I was going to say, you haven't had an offensive winner yet. You haven't had an offensive day, have you?
Yeah, unless you're overgrading some individual work. When it comes to team drills, it's 4-0. It's 4-0.
That's pretty impressive from the defense. Is that the takeaway you should have if you're looking at through eagle-colored glasses? Of course it is, but in honesty, has the defense been that good every single day, or has the offense allowed the defense to dominate them and have major issues to work through?
Well, that's the question. I asked that question myself. I've been very impressed with this defense. I think they look much better than I expected. But is that because they're much better than I expected, or because the offense is that bad? That's sort of what you're trying to figure out. I will say days 1 and 3 were blowouts. 2 and 4 were a little bit closer. I mean, they've been good. And part of it, the defensive line is really good. I think Josh Sweat has been the best player in camp, period. So you add the depth there. They love Milton Williams. They're going to be talented and deep on the defensive line. We thought corner was going to be the worst position on this team. It's looking like excellent. You question the depth. You always worry about injuries. But if Slay and Nelson are out there, you're going to be set. And then you worry about the linebackers a little bit. But even Davion Taylor, he's another guy. Now, he sat out Saturday. And Jody, I don't know if you heard me, Jeff, but I've been saying my theory was throw that kid in the deep end of the pool, see if he can play. And they're doing it. Now, he tweaked his quad and wasn't able to practice Saturday, but he's day to day, so it's not serious. And he's been pretty good, and he's so much more athletic than any other linebacker they have. You mentioned he hits 20 or 21 on the GPS miles per hour as a linebacker. Tyreek Hill hits 22. That's how fast he is. Now, again, there's more to it than that. There's football IQ, there's instincts. We'll see. But if you think about Anthony Barr, if you think about Eric Kendricks, if you think about Darius Leonard, they want athleticism on the field, and he's athletic.
So, John, this kind of brings me up to my next point, how good the cornerbacks have played. Outside Devonta Smith, is there any wide receivers that have stood up over the last couple of days?
No, and by the way, Devonta is getting beat up as well. I mean, that's, but I think that's good. I mean, there was one rep where Nelson just took him out of bounds, and they threw a flag, but I think it was meant to make Devonta feel better. So he's going to see some of this press coverage and some of this physicality. So that's where I say it's good that he's seeing it in camp. I think that's going to help him long term. It's interesting. The best receiver, I think, in camp has been Michael Walker, and that's not a good thing, obviously. I mean, he's just really quick, more of a slot receiver, good route runner. Everybody else, I mean, Jalen Reagor, obviously, you guys know the issues there. He's dealing with some personal things, and a close friend of his died, was actually murdered. So I don't think he was in the right headspace. He failed his conditioning test. So, I mean, they were counting on him to take a big leap forward in year two. He finally got back into team drills on Saturday. So that was the first day. Everybody else has been similar to Eagles wide receivers, as you would think about Eagles wide receivers.
Yeah, which is not good, but it is very early in camp. You mentioned Davion Taylor and how he's playing. I've asked this to most of our guests here in the first couple of weeks. If one of last year's 2 mid-round draft picks were to step up, which one was going to be the one who was going to step in? And most everybody said K'Von Wallace, because he was in a bigger program, not a project type player that he'd be able to step in and play. You're telling me Taylor's the one who's looking good, but also I've read and people have reported that Wallace has been pretty damn good too. So maybe both of those Howie Roseman draft picks can contribute to the team this year.
Yeah, I put Wallace in my story as well, but I had him more as a stagnant stock. He hasn't been bad. He's gotten more first team reps than Marcus Epps. So that's a positive as far as, replacing Rodney McLeod in the short term. Obviously, the hope is Rodney will be there week 1. If not, most likely K'Von's gonna fill in. He hasn't made a lot of splash plays, but he hasn't made a lot of mistakes either, and that's not bad for a second-year player. So I think he can hold down the fort. What I will say is Taylor's the classic boomer bust guy. I mean, he's got the much higher ceiling. If you're going to compare those two players. But nobody knows if he has the other stuff, and that's why they're trying to get him as many reps as possible. And hopefully he can get on the field quickly from this quad. But, if you think about it, you start thinking about those soft tissue injuries. I mean, his whole game is predicated on speed. So he needs to be, Doug Peterson would always call it the thoroughbreds, and those guys need to be 100% when it comes to hamstring, quad, groin, calf, or, they're not going to be nearly as effective. So maybe that's a bigger concern than it is for, say, a savvy linebacker with a high football IQ. He needs to be at that top tier sort of physical ability. But I will say, if you're just talking purely ceiling, yeah, I mean, Davion's got a much higher ceiling.
John, I was trying to read between the lines a little bit Saturday when Nick spoke, and he had a lot of praise for Jordan Mailata. I mean, for a guy in a left tackle competition, he was trying to, I guess, I'm trying to think of the best word for it, lighten up Andre Dillard, saying all the bumps and bruises, but Jordan Mailata, he had plenty of good things to say about him.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's funny to me because I know how GMs work, and it's more of, I think Andre's going to get every opportunity to win this job. And I've said that pretty much, Jody knows, pretty consistently. But it's more about the GM than anything else. It seems like everybody outside the NovaCare complex wants to give the job to Jordan. I'm not sure that's where the Eagles are. I know everybody's focused on one-on-ones. I can tell. I've talked to Jeff Stoutland about this. He hates one-on-ones because, I just talked about 7-on-7s. One-on-ones for offensive, defensive linemen, that's really difficult for the offensive linemen. That's, it's sort of expected. So when people say Derek Barnett had a great rep against Andre Dillard, it doesn't mean that much to Jeff Stoutman. It's what I'm saying. The pads are supposed to come on Tuesday unless they change something. And that's also what Nick said. I mean, offensive line is one of those positions, probably the two. The other would be running back. You got to see the guys with the pads on. And if Andre performs well or it's even, they're going to default to Andre Dillard. So it's sort of like an old school heavyweight boxing match, and Andre's the champion, and George's got to knock him out, or he's got to beat him pretty badly if he's going to win this job. And then the second part, and this is kind of
Johnny, let me hop in there for a second. Andre Dillard's the champion. Why? I know he was drafted higher, but what they've done on the field during their time in the National Football League, Mailata's been the superior player. So is it purely because Howie Roseman used a first-round draft pick on Andre Dillard that you would say he's the champion and Mailata has to beat him?
I'm gonna answer this by asking if you saw Jordan Hicks' comments out in Arizona. I don't know if you saw them, but
I did.
After the Cardinals drafted a linebacker in the first round, Steve Heim called him up and said, there's no competition. He's going to be the starter. I mean, I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying I know how general managers are, and they default to their draft picks because, and think about it, it's common sense. I mean, if they fail with too many draft picks, well, that looks badly on their record. And obviously, people joke that Howie can't get fired here because how close he can get fired. He fired Joe Banner. Joe Banner was as close to Jeffrey Lurie as anybody. So ultimately, they default, and it's not just Howie Roseman. It's every single general manager in this league defaults to its high draft picks. And what I mean by that is they give them opportunity after opportunity. And that's why I say you can win the job, but you have a very narrow path to win the job. And then the second part, Jody, I was going to say before is, and this is a little counterintuitive, but we know the NFL is that way at times. Jordan is a swing tackle, too. He can play the right side. So he shapes up better as a backup than Andre Dillard, who was a disaster on the right side as a natural left tackle. I'm not saying it's right, but I think they're going to give every opportunity to Andre Dillard to win that job. So, in other words, he can lose it, but he's got the easier path.
If Dillard does lose the job, though, do the Eagles move on? Do they try to trade him?
Yeah, it's possible. It's an offensive line deficient league. I mean, they are deep. I think they could try to trade Matt Pryor, somebody like that. Not, if you think about the Dennis Kelly trade, maybe that didn't work out. Obviously, they got Dorial Green-Beckham, but everybody's looking for offensive linemen in this league always. And the Eagles have a lot of them. And they're going to have to cut NFL-level players. And you might think Matt Pryor can't play, and he's probably not going to be able to make this roster. But Jeff, from covering this league as a whole, there ain't a lot of good offensive linemen in this league. And there are a lot of teams where Matt Pryor would be an upgrade for them. So that's one of the strengths of the Eagles. I mean, Suo Pettit, you're not going to get a lot. I'm talking late day 3 picks. But in the case of Andre Dillard, yeah, I mean, they could somebody will look at that pedigree and say, remember during the draft process and how they graded him, and say, we can fix this guy. If they want to move him, they'll be able to move him.
All right, John, I want to move it into the backfield for you. All reports, yours included, other guys out there covering the Eagles, have said the Eagles have looked pretty good out of the running back position, beat either guys running the ball and or catching the ball out of the backfield. It's not just been Miles Sanders and the guys behind him. A whole bunch of guys have flashed so far. How deep does the Eagle running back position look to you right now?
Yeah, it's pretty deep compared to where it was. Jordan Howard looks good, but that's one of those positions I said you gotta wait for the pads to go on. It's interesting because Jordan, by the way, also is a physical runner, so that's not going to be an issue with him. I think the impressive part with him is that he looks like he's got a little juice, and even himself was questioning when he re-signed with the Eagles. He questioned, I thought I was done. He wasn't getting any interest. And there were people around this league who just thought he had no gas left in the tank. So he's impressed me. They clearly want to get this, what they call 21 speed, this package with Miles Sanders and Kenny Gainwell. They want to get that into the mix, at least on occasion. We'll see if that works out. Kenny's a rookie. He struggled a little bit with consistency. Huntley, this guy nobody talks about. He's the fastest guy they got. He is just lightning. He's faster than Miles, I think. But that he's got a tough numbers game facing him. Kerryon Johnson, I think that the questions about him are health related. So we have to kind of wait on that. And then Boston Scott is just a guy everybody forgets, and but he's just solid. He's not great, but he's somebody you can count on. So ultimately, that's a position with a lot of competition after Miles Sanders, and it's going to be interesting. Are they just going to default to the younger guys and move on from Jordan Howard, or are they going to sort of default to players they know that can do it, and that would be Howard and Kerryon Johnson if they're healthy and if they're capable of going?
John, there was one battle it kind of went overlooked going into camp, but the number 2 QB battle between Joe Flacco and Nick Mullens. And I talked to a couple people on the 49ers. They said that was a really good signing for the Eagles. And I actually liked Nick Mullens when he was out there. Your thoughts on that battle so far?
Yeah, I don't think it's a battle. Joe got significant money and promised that he's going to be the backup quarterback, and I think he's going to be the backup quarterback. I don't think either of them. Nick is coming off elbow surgery. I think I'm with you. I know Jody doesn't agree with us, Jeff. I think he's a capable backup quarterback in this league, but he did have elbow surgery, and he doesn't look like he's 100% back when it comes to arm strength, which was probably never his strength as a player to begin with. To me, it's going to be interesting. Do they keep 3 quarterbacks on the 53, or do they try to get Nick Mullens through waivers and or cut him and bring him back? I forget if he's vested or not. I forget how many years Nick has got, but if they try to get him on the practice squad, because now you have veterans on the practice squad because they're still going over the COVID rules. Now, the problem with that is if you try that route, you see what's going on in Minnesota, right? With these COVID protocols. They're essentially almost their whole quarterback room got shut down. So somebody like Nick Mullens might be plucked up pretty quickly if you don't give him a roster spot.
I was going to say, better chance. The Eagles have done this before, and this is pre-Howie and Howie, turning quarterbacks into some kind of asset, be it a late day 3 pick, as you described a couple other guys like the Eagle backup offensive lineman. It could be used as trade chips, not big trades, but the minor trades. Could Nick Mullens be a guy who, if the Eagles make him available, a team would say, hey, yeah, he's actually better than our backup. If we can get our backup quarterback for a 6 or a 7, why don't we go ahead and do it?
Yeah, I mean, if he plays well in the preseason, yeah, that could happen. But you also have to worry about that same situation happening to you. And I don't know if I want to go into a modern NFL season with only 2 quarterbacks. You have to have somebody on the practice squad. You might have to have 2 on the practice squad, just in case. So I'm not sure they want to do that, but yeah, they could do it, especially if he plays well in the preseason.
Then let me ask you, John, who is that guy? You and I saw it the same way as we're going through the draft and the time after. Oh, they got to have a practice squad quarterback. Who is he? If you don't think Mullens is going to get through waivers, and you can't put him on the practice squad, and oh, by the way, he'd have to choose you to be on your practice squad to begin with, which he may see better opportunities elsewhere and choose someone else. Who is this guy? When are they actually going to bring in somebody who looks like a practice squad quarterback?
Well, remember, everybody else is going to be paring down as well. So obviously they have, they'll have people, maybe they liked them in the draft, maybe they're younger quarterbacks. But the larger point there, Jody, and why I brought it up is I think they're keeping Nick on the 53. I think they're going to keep 3 quarterbacks on the 53 for that reason, because they're going to be concerned. And remember, I think people forget, the game day rosters, you got to have inactive players anyway. So they act like, oh, you need that roster spot. Really? No, you don't. They're not up on game days anyway. So I don't see the problem with keeping 3 quarterbacks. Now, if it is a young guy, if it is a more developmental prospect that you can get through waivers and there's not any concern over it, then yeah. But in Mullens' case, I just keep him on the back end of the roster.
And in defense of Nick Sirianni, when he was in Indianapolis, outside of the starting quarterback, they didn't really have much. Where it was Andrew Luck, or when Jacoby Brissett was eventually the starter, they didn't have anybody. And this year they really don't have anybody with Nick Sirianni's not there. But after Carson Wentz, it's you could pick the Colts quarterback out of a hat.
Oh,
yeah,
and I was going to say, be careful. I'm a JAKIB fan. I think JAKIB could step in, play well, and all of a sudden, Carson Wentz with competition. Oh, my God, he loses his mind in Indianapolis.
Yeah. I think, the bigger thing with Indianapolis is the fact that Nick had to go through so many different quarterbacks over his years there, starting with Andrew Luck's sudden retirement and going to Jacoby Brissett. That's one of the reasons he's here. And then Phillip Rivers, because you had these 3 different style quarterbacks, and the Colts offense was always at least competent, probably the low side with Jacoby Brissett, up to really good at times. And a lot of people looked at that and said, it's pretty impressive that you can morph your offense around a different style quarterback and still put out a pretty good product each year. Whether it works or not, we'll see. And a lot of people said, why is Joe Flacco your backup quarterback when he's a completely different style quarterback than Jalen Hurts? And that's what Nick says. I mean, you just roll with the punches and you work around what your quarterback on that particular game day does well.
John, last thing, and this is something I think we're going to be watching all year long. If the answer is one thing today, it could be different 2 weeks from now, could be different in season. Who's the defensive leader of this team? And I'm not talking about Gannon. I'm talking about on the field.
That's a good question. Typically, you think about middle linebacker and you think about safety. So when Rodney McLeod is healthy, it'll probably be him in the back 7. Until then, it'll probably be Anthony Harris. Linebacker is up in the air. I think a lot of people think about Eric Wilson. I mean, he's been on the second team, so I don't know how much he's been impressing. Now, he's taken plenty of first team reps, but they're rotating. I thought he'd be in there and never leave the field with the first team. That hasn't been the case. I do think he will call the defense if he's out there. Ultimately, I think he wins the job. So on the field, I would default to him. In the locker room, it's going to be, one of the defensive linemen, Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox, those guys. So, but on the field, it has to be the guy calling signals. And look, the Eagles have an issue at linebacker. There's no question about that.
although they keep winning the day, according to Coach Nick Sirianni. Let's see if the offense can actually get a win today. JM, good stuff always. We'll get you up first thing in the show tomorrow. Head on down to camp. Thanks for getting on with us today.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Johnny Mac, John McMullen here with us on Birds 365. Jeff Kerr filling in for him as the host of the show. Come back. I'll chop it up with Jeff a little bit. We got our buddy Brooks to join us a little bit later in the show. We're rolling along as week 2 of training camp gets underway today here on Birds 365.
Today's show on the JAKIB Media channel. Listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.